welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so if you're someone who loves gaining knowledge efficiently, you are probably, and honestly, you should be highly skeptical whenever you hear, big health claims about herbal supplements.
Oh, absolutely. The marketing hype is usually completely out of control.
Right. There is just a tremendous amount of noise out there, and separating that hype from actual science can feel like a full-time job.
It really can.
But today, we're looking at something that might actually surprise you. We are talking about artichoke leaf extract, or as the botanists call it, Cynara Scolymus.
A very fancy name for what most people just consider, a vehicle for spinach dip.
Exactly. But we have a very specific mission for this deep dive. I've got this massive stack of sources here. We are talking rigorous clinical trials, systematic reviews, and large-scale dose-response meta-analyses.
The gold standard stuff.
A gold standard. Our explicit mission today is to completely cut through the noise. We are intentionally ignoring all those tiny, contradictory outlier studies that just muddy the waters.
Yeah, the ones with like 12 people in them that claim to cure everything.
Right, we're tossing those out. Instead, we are focusing exclusively on the well-known, trustworthy consensus data. Because when you look at that broader scientific agreement, artichoke has a surprisingly robust clinical profile.
It really does. It's impressive.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we're looking at the absolute strongest, most undeniable evidence, the moderate to high-grade research, where does it actually point?
It points directly to your cardiovascular system, specifically your lipid profile.
Cholesterol.
Exactly, cholesterol management. When researchers look at the highest quality tiers of evidence, the clinical consensus almost universally revolves around lipids. We aren't talking about single small studies here.
Right, I'm looking at this massive 2018 meta-analysis by Sahebkar.
Oh, that's a cornerstone piece of research.
Yeah, it pulled together 9 different randomized controlled trials involving over 700 subjects.
And that was further backed up by the 2021 Shahinfar meta-analysis, which looked at 14 different studies.
Yeah.
So the sample size is highly credible.
So we have these massive pools of aggregated data. But what do the actual numbers look like? If I'm taking this, are we talking about some invisible, tiny rounding error or an actual drop in cholesterol?
It is a clinically noticeable drop. When subjects take standardized artichoke leaf extract, the trusted consensus shows their total cholesterol drops by roughly 17 to 18 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay, that's significant.
It is. And their LDL, the bad cholesterol, drops by about 15 to 17 milligrams per deciliter.
Wow. And what about triglycerides?
Triglycerides drop by 9 to 17 milligrams per deciliter.
Now wait, to stick to our mission of only looking at the absolute trusted consensus, what about HDL, the good cholesterol? Because every supplement online seems to claim it boosts the good while lowering the bad.
Yeah, that is exactly where we have to filter out the noise.
So it doesn't.
No. If you dig around, you might find some rogue outlier study claiming that artichoke magically boosts your HDL. But when we zoom out and look at the reliable aggregate data, there is no reliable change in HDL whatsoever.
Got it. So it ignores the good cholesterol and strictly goes after the bad stuff.
Precisely.
But I really want to understand the mechanism here. What is the extract actually doing inside the body to pull those LDL and triglyceride numbers down?
Well, the leaves contain high concentrations of specific plant compounds, most notably 2 called Cynarin and luteolin, and they essentially act through a dual mechanism.
Okay, dual mechanism. What's the first part?
First, they inhibit a specific enzyme in your liver called HMG-CoA reductase.
HMG-CoA reductase. That sounds incredibly familiar.
It should. It's the exact same enzyme that prescription statin drugs target.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Your body uses that enzyme to synthesize its own cholesterol. So by inhibiting it, the extract tells your liver to stop producing so much new cholesterol.
That makes perfect sense. And the second part?
The second part is that these compounds simultaneously increase bile acid secretion.
Wait, how do those two things connect? Slowing cholesterol production and ramping up bile?
Your body uses cholesterol as a fundamental building block to make bile. Right. So if the extract stimulates the liver to pump out more bile, it essentially forces your body to pull existing cholesterol out of your bloodstream to meet the demand.
It flushes it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The cholesterol converts to bile, and you flush it out through your digestive tract. What's fascinating here is that this dual action slowing production while increasing excretion makes artichoke leaf extract a fantastic complementary measure.
Complementary. So adjunctive for, like, mild to moderate Hypercholesterolemia?
Yes, but we need to be crystal clear on this point.
Right. If someone has severely high cholesterol and they're on a prescription statin, this isn't a free pass to throw away their meds and start chewing on artichoke leaves.
Absolutely not. Artichoke is not a replacement for prescription statins in high-risk patients.
Right. A 17-point drop is great, but it won't save someone who needs a 60-point drop to prevent a heart attack.
Exactly. It's an evidence-based tool for that mild to moderate middle ground. Maybe for someone whose doctor said, watch your diet and try to get your numbers down before we start medication.
Okay, so it's clearly doing heavy lifting in the bloodstream. But the liver is the engine driving all of this. It's doing the filtering, making the bile.
Yes, the liver is central to this whole process.
So I have to ask, how does the liver itself fare? Are we risking exhausting the liver by forcing it to constantly pump out bile?
It's a highly logical question, but the research points in the exact opposite direction.
Really?
Yeah. The second major area of undeniable scientific agreement revolves around hepatoprotection. It actually protects the liver.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, we see phenomenal data regarding non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
NAFLD.
And just for anyone listening who isn't familiar, NAFLD is essentially when excess fat builds up in the liver cells of people who drink little to no alcohol, usually tied to diet or metabolic issues.
Yeah, correct. It heavily stresses the organ, and the trusted data here is incredibly strong.
I see a study here in our stack, the 2018 Panahi double-blind RCT.
Yes, the Panahi study. They took 100 subjects specifically diagnosed with NAFLD, and they gave them 600 milligrams of artichoke leaf extract per day for 2 months. What were they measuring?
Key liver stress enzymes, ALT and AST. When the liver is inflamed, those enzymes leak into the bloodstream.
And did they drop?
Significantly.
Yeah.
The patients saw significant reductions in both stress markers. But they didn't just rely on blood tests. They used ultrasound imaging to physically look at the liver.
What did the ultrasounds show?
An actual reduction in liver fat. And remarkably, an overall reduction in the physical size of the liver itself.
Wait, it physically shrank?
Yes. When a liver is fatty, it swells. The ultrasound showed the organ literally shrinking back to a healthier size.
That is incredible. I love to think of it like a botanical bouncer for your liver.
A botanical bouncer. I like that.
Yeah. It's just standing at the door of the liver cells, clearing out the fat and kicking out the toxins that cause all that swelling.
That analogy is actually incredibly accurate to the biochemistry. The extract provides a substantial influx of antioxidants. They neutralize harmful molecules, drastically lowering oxidative stress.
So it reduces the damage.
Right. Combine that with the choleritic effect, that outward flow of bile we discussed, and the extract acts as a literal shield for hepatocytes, or liver cells. It takes the workload off the liver, so it has the breathing room to heal.
Okay, so we've got solid consensus on cholesterol, proven improvements for fatty liver disease. Let's pivot slightly. If it's stimulating bile flow, how does that impact the rest of the digestion process?
The clinical agreement on gut health is just as strong. Let's look at the 2003 Hultman multi-center trial.
I have that one right here. 247 patients.
Yes, and all of them were suffering from functional dyspepsia.
Which basically means chronic indigestion. Persistent bloating, feeling overly full after 2 bites, nausea, but without any structural reason, like an ulcer.
Exactly. It makes every meal a gamble. In the Hultman trial, they gave these patients roughly 960 milligrams of the extract a day.
And the results?
Over 6 weeks, there was a massive 40% reduction in those functional dyspepsia symptoms.
40%. That is a massive quality of life upgrade for someone in chronic stomach pain. Why does it work so well?
Again, it comes back to the bile. By stimulating the gallbladder and getting bile flowing, it helps the body break down dietary fats much more efficiently.
So the food doesn't just sit there.
Right. It moves through your digestive tract at the right speed. It stops sitting in the stomach and fermenting, which is what causes that painful bloating.
Okay, this brings up a really important point where we need to bust some persistent myths.
Let's do it.
Because artichoke has these proven physical benefits, you see some wild claims online. People say it improves mental well-being, cures depression, or even extends human longevity. Is there any truth to that in the consensus data?
Relying strictly on the trusted human clinical data, we have to be very clear. There is zero direct evidence that artichoke extends human lifespan.
None.
None.
Yeah, no.
And there is zero direct evidence that it cures depression or anxiety.
But wait, I've read summaries of those exact clinical trials, and they specifically mention that patients taking artichoke reported feeling less anxious. How do you square that circle?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the gut-brain axis. In those dyspepsia trials, they did measure quality of life and anxiety scores. And yes, the patients showed reduced anxiety.
So they did feel better mentally.
They did. But the critical context is why they felt better. The only reason they showed mental improvements was simply because their stomachs stopped hurting.
Well, that makes perfect sense. If you have chronic nausea for weeks, you're going to be miserable and anxious.
Precisely. The mental benefit is entirely a secondary result of physical GI relief. It is not a direct neurological effect of the plant.
That is such a crucial distinction for you as the listener to keep in mind. You aren't taking a magic brain pill. You're taking a stomach-soothing pill that makes you feel better mentally because you aren't in physical pain anymore.
Exactly.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the journey of this extract through the body. I was looking at this 2005 pharmacokinetics study by Whittemore.
Oh, yes. This completely changes how we view the mechanism of action.
Because when you consume the extract, the primary compounds that everyone talks about, like Cynarin, they aren't even detected intact in your bloodstream.
Not at all.
So wait, the compounds we just spent 15 minutes praising aren't even making it into the blood? How is it working?
It comes down to first-pass metabolism. When you swallow the extract, it goes straight to the gut and liver. The liver essentially whips those original artichoke compounds apart.
It metabolizes them.
Rapidly. It metabolizes them into entirely new, highly active conjugates, specifically things like caffeic acid and ferulic acid.
So the original plant compounds are just the raw materials, and the liver acts like a manufacturing plant, building these new active molecules.
Exactly. And it's these new molecules, the conjugates, that actually enter your bloodstream and do the heavy lifting. They provide that antioxidant shield and signal the cholesterol pathways.
That is fascinating, but it raises a really practical question. To get these benefits, how should you actually consume it? Because I'm assuming eating a single artichoke heart off a slice of pizza isn't going to lower my LDL by 17 points.
Definitely not. To hit the clinical doses, you need a standardized dry extract.
What are the target doses?
For lipid management, the consensus points to 500 to 1,800 milligrams a day.
Yeah.
For digestion, usually 300 to 1,800 milligrams a day. For digestion, usually 320 to 640 milligrams taken 3 times a day.
And what does standardized mean in this context?
You're aiming for an extract standardized to contain between 2.5 and 5% caffeoylquinic acids. You simply cannot eat enough whole artichokes to hit those therapeutic doses daily.
But let's say you do want to eat them whole. They're delicious and they have great prebiotic fiber. Does the data give us insight into how to cook them to get the most out of the plant?
It does. If you steam whole artichokes, the heat and moisture soften the plant matrix. This actually increases the antioxidant extractability by 8 to 15 times.
Wow, so steaming unlocks the compounds. What about frying? Fried artichokes are huge in Mediterranean cooking.
Unfortunately, the high, dry heat of frying destroys the beneficial flavonoids entirely.
Oh, that's a shame. So steam, don't fry. Now, while we're on practical applications, we absolutely must lay out the strict safety warnings. Just because it's a plant doesn't mean it's harmless.
That's a critical point. Its main mechanism of action is exactly what makes it dangerous for certain people. Because it aggressively stimulates bile flow, it is an absolute contraindication for anyone with a bile duct obstruction or active gallstones.
Let's break that down. If you have a gallstone blocking a duct, and you force a massive wave of bile into that blocked duct,
You trigger a biliary crisis. The pressure builds up, causing excruciating pain, and it could require emergency surgery. If you have a history of gallstones, you must avoid this extract completely.
do not experiment with that. What about allergies?
If you're allergic to the Asteraceae family daisies, ragweed, chrysanthemums, you might have a cross-reactive allergy to artichokes.
Good to know. And lastly, drug interactions. It impacts the liver heavily and inhibits the same enzyme as statins.
Right. Your liver uses specific pathways like chemical toll booths to break down drugs. Think of the CYP2B6 and CYP2C19 pathways. Artichoke extract can interfere with those pathways. So if you are on prescription statins or drugs metabolized by CYP2B6 or CYP2C19, you must check with a pharmacist.
Absolute caution is the rule. You don't want to accidentally amplify or block your prescription meds.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean? It means that if we intentionally ignore the internet hype and the outlier studies and strictly look at the rigorous consensus data, artichoke leaf extract is not some magical cure-all.
No, it's not.
But it is a rigorously studied, evidence-based tool. It modestly lowers total and LDL cholesterol. It physically reduces liver fat in AFLD, and it significantly eases functional dyspepsia.
Provided you use the right standardized dose and avoid those specific safety pitfalls.
Exactly. Well said. And I will leave you, the listener, with this final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over. We've just spent this entire deep dive proving that a spiky, ancient Mediterranean plant contains compounds that actively mimic modern cholesterol-lowering drugs.
It's pretty amazing.
It really makes you wonder, what other overlooked culinary staples are hiding in plain sight in our grocery store aisles, just waiting for their own clinical meta-analyses to reveal what they can really do? Think about that next time you're wandering through the produce section. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.